Okay, welcome everybody to 1:30 meeting. This is just one meeting in a series going over budget, and I don't know who wants to start. I think we're going over with Sheriff's Office today, obviously.
Yep, I understand we're the first.
Are you the first?
We're the first department to do this, is that right?
Well, the first is
go around?
always the best.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'll turn over to Katrina Harris, our budget manager, to give an overview.
So you're the first because you're the most expensive, and that sets the tone for the rest of the departments as we begin whacking away.
I
Sure.
think you like my comment better.
I think
didn't
so.
you? Yeah.
I think so.
I'll try to talk loud. I lost my voice last night. Commissioner Weber asked me a couple years ago to put all the costs of the sheriff's office in one line because we have so many different funds that touch. So that's what I handed you today. It includes the civil service budget, which really is under Kathy in the budget office, but they serve our department. She supervises that budget. We're up to 52.25 FTEs in the sheriff's office. That includes animal control and behavior health that was added in the last year. And then we have sheriff's extradition. And then we have our sheriff's crime reduction team, which used to be the drug task force. And then we have a small budget that is part of the boat safety grant, and we get some vessel fees. And then we have the Ben admin budget, which is our left one, and I'm down to 12 members of my left one budget now. Then we have a special one for our canine, then the Bearcat with the bond payments. Emergency management has 3 FTEs. We have the sheriff range, law enforcement records with 11 FTEs, law enforcement records with the Spillman side of our bills that we share costs with all the police agencies, and they pay into that. And then we have 3.45 FTEs that are funded now out of law and justice. And then we have 1 deputy that gets 50% of his wage from public works, 5% from environmental health, and then the 45% he split out of law and justice fund. That's how we came up with those totals. Changes to this budget, the deputies' contract was settled. They received 4% COLA for 2025. That was already in the budget when we did a 2-year budget last year. The undersheriff, the chief administrative deputy, and the criminal deputy wages are based off that contract, so their rates are based on that. The most significant change you'll see is that the sheriff's clerk's contract was not settled when we did the 24 and 25 budget, and it is now. So you'll see a pretty big raise there for them. They ended up with a 4% cost of living in 2024 and then another 3% in 2025. Both of them also got more contributions for medical, so medical went up a little bit too. And then of course, all of that changes Social Security and benefits that way. We have a $35,000 increase in our overtime line that's different from last year because the sheriff signed a contract with Weyerhaeuser to do patrols again. We haven't done that for 4 or 5 years. So that flat $35,000 is what the contract is for, and we'll be reimbursed for that amount. There actually is a decrease of $20,799. When we did the 24-25 budget, the budget office accidentally in the formula had the rate for the deputies way too high, and I caught it and had them adjust it down. So then significant changes are just, cost of business for motor pool has gone up. So we show a $122,000 increase for motor pool this year. IT costs have gone up, which also includes telephones this year at $52,000. So overall, our increase in our budget is $560,467 from 24 to 25 on there. Did Kathy give you guys budgets to look at and things yet? Not yet. Oh, and then also the behavior health we'll get a transfer in for the behavior health money. And there is in the budget, there's a couple things in our sheriff's budget. We get $98,000 for registered sex offender clerks' wages and costs with a grant. We get $268,000 in the budget for mental health tax to be transferred in to help offset that cost for the behavior health part of it. There's not really any significant changes more than what we already put in the 25 budget unless you have some questions on those. I also, go ahead.
I was going to
Sheriff.
just mention behavioral health. Previously, that was mental health tax money that the health department transferred over to Columbia Wellness because we had contract employees.
Right.
March 1 of this year, they came in-house as employees. So I think the estimate for 2025 is about 260,000. There's a part of that increase is that showing them as a county employees now. So that's a
So-
big chunk of that.
So the 560 that I said was an overall increase.
Yeah,
That a lot of that is because of behavior health is now in our budget and they weren't in our budget last year.
they weren't in your budget, but they were expense we incurred.
Yes, but it was
Yeah.
through the health department budget.
Right,
So now they're
Right.
in our budget. It makes it look like we've had this big increase
yeah.
in there. And then other budgets that we have in here is our law enforcement records. Theirs is going to have a exactly the same thing with their clerk's contract hadn't settled in 2023. So they have an increase for 24 and 25 with their new 3% cost of living. Their biggest increase was IT costs was $23,000. Insurance was another $4,800. And then janitorial costs are $3,500. I don't know if you know how this janitorial thing works, but they figure out the cost and then they do a cost allocation of square footage and then they bill the funds for that. That means that the Department of Emergency Management pays about $29,000 a year and records pays $27,000 a year. I don't know if that's something we can look at later, but it seems really high to me
Because of the square footage. they
because of the square
occupy.
footage, yep. And they only come in a couple times a week and the whole thing, I mean, you could hire a full-time employee almost for that cost. So, and then in Department of Emergency Management, their only increases are the IT cost is 13,000 more, their janitorial is another 4,000. And that's the only changes that they made in their budget as well. Anything else?
Question about the Bearcat.
Yes, sir.
That's substantially higher than I recall was what we had originally agreed upon. That whole structure got changed and it was going to be a net savings to the county, not the taxpayer. And this looks higher than the number I had thought. This is almost over 6,000 a month. And I didn't think we were paying 6,000 a month.
Well, we're not paying all that. Our contribution is $14,000 a year to make the bond and the principal payment. And we have a contract with all the other police agencies and I bill them for their part. And then it comes in this fund. So I bill it out, get the money in, and then I pay the bond payments and the principal payments on it.
Okay, so this, like other stuff, includes costs that will get reimbursed.
Correct.
You covered that on one of the other categories, and that applies to the Bearcat. 14,000 is the right number?
Is our portion for 10 years.
That's the number I remember. Okay.
Yes. The boat safety one, we get about $10,000 grant money and we get about $30,000 vessel money. So when we do our boat patrols out on the river, that all has to be, we can only use those funds to do boat patrols. There's a whole bunch of reporting that goes with it to make sure that's done. I'm actually working on it this week. Emergency management has a couple grants. One of them pays for one of their employees up to $50,000. And I think they have another grant that's $25,000. And they also bill out. So we take the entire cost after the grants of the budget for the Department of Emergency Management. And then there's a formula based on population and I think assessed evaluation. And then the Kelso, Kalama, Castle Rock, Woodland, Longview, and the county get billed for that amount to pay in. So the county's contribution to that for 25 is 202,000, comes from general fund into Department of Emergency Management. They have a $60,000 grant.
I'm doing my darndest to follow you, but you're going too fast for me.
Okay, I'll go slower.
So go ahead and restart that last two sentences, please.
So the Department of Emergency Management budget, we take the total amount that they are going to spend, and 60,000 is a grant, 60,900 is another grant. So we take that off. Anything that's left, we use a formula to do assessed evaluation and population. And then we split the cost and bill out to the entities. So the county's portion from general fund is 202,491 for 2025. And then each one of the other police agencies or cities, Kelso, Kalama, Castle Rock, Woodland, and Longview are also all billed to help fund the Department of Emergency Management. Does that help?
So again, how much from our general fund goes to?
202,491.
Interesting.
So about 1/5 of the cost of the department
Yeah.
comes from our general fund. The rest of it is from grants and the cities.
Correct.
Cities and fire districts?
No, just the cities, just the 5 cities pay into it.
Hmm. I would have guessed like you.
And it's based on assessed evaluation and population. There's a formula and there's a contract from way back. That's how the
Hmm.
breakdown was on that. Law records is very similar with money coming in and money coming out. We have after-hour contracts with the cities to provide after hours and holidays and weekend services. So we bill out everything that we can bill out to the cities per their contract. And then the county pays in from general fund. They pay in a lot. They pay 960,000 into law records for general fund.
960 is our share.
Yes,
So almost half.
yeah. And then I bill out the contracts for the rest. And it's similar with the Spillman.
Does, Brad, does that break down pretty fairly? I mean, I know that we do the felony charges as well. I mean, the county does. So the county does about half of the law enforcement records, the cities account for the other half. Is that how it really kind of works out?
That's fairly accurate. They do their own municipal court orders and warrants during business hours, and our after hours and weekends, just verifying those and confirming those if those need to be confirmed there. But the bulk of our work does come from the Superior Court.
And who do we get the funds from for the Spillman system? Kind
That's
of
the
the
next
capital
budget.
cost of major, that's the next item.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
the
okay.
next, it's the second law records budget. And all the Spillman costs goes through there, including like Spillman forms and
Then I got ahead of myself. I did have another question about law enforcement records.
okay,
So you said our share is 960,000 out of a $2 million budget.
Correct.
So we're spending the rest of that amount is the after hours services that we
Correct.
provide to City of Longview and Kelso and the other cities.
yes.
So
So they get about 3.1, they pay for about 3.1 FTEs between all those other cities. We split out about 3.1 FTEs that they pay for. So it looks like about,
sounds like we're getting a deal.
yeah.
I mean,
Any more questions on law records? There is a second law records budget. Okay, the second budget is for Spillman only. We have contracts with all the cities that they have to pay part of the shared computer program that they all use. And there's a Spillman form side of it, and there's a Spillman's, I don't know, the guys know more about it than me, but we do have contracts and I bill out for it. And then the county pays a portion of that. The whole budget is only 299,000. The portion from the county is 52,450.
That 299,000 is what
It's for Spillman.
paid to just for the software service?
Yes, but some of that is ending fund balance. 123 is ending fund balance. So it kind of stays in the fund in case we have emergency expenses. So it's really not a whole 299.
So just to be sure, you don't have any FTEs in there. That's just something
No.
we pay it's a license fee essentially. in
Correct.
One form or another. Okay. thank
And
you.
Spillman, that's kind of the backbone. It's our database. Dispatch Center uses a module. They pay for their portion of it. The jail uses a portion. They pay for that. And as far as the records, the jail joins us collectively and as part of that. And you approved a contract here. If there's a change, it's Reliable Solutions. It's that's a network consultant on that to maintain and keep that going. That is the backbone of our local criminal justice database that we use.
It's about 180 is the total cost,
Mhm.
not including the ending fund balance. So we bill out about 180 to the other entities and get all that money back in the fund.
And we did receive the benefit when just was 2022, when the 911 went to the Spillman system. As part of that upgrade for them, they got brand new servers and they run the servers for the whole system that we in the jail use as well. So it used to be that before they were involved, that records, we had the server and had to replace that every, I think about a 5-year cycle. And that was probably pushing $100,000 to do that. Now the dispatch center, I guess it's a benefit we get from our user fees with them, that they're going to maintain that.
So I think this ties into that. On page 2, you show IT allocation. That's above and that's something out of your control. It's whatever algorithm we use for IT got allocated over to you.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
In that,
There's a
Okay.
cost allocation the budget office calculates and then they put it in our budget. So we don't have any control over
and
that.
some costs we don't really account for here. Does IT do anything special for you for the Spillman program or the Spillman server?
So one thing that we get billed for our IT cost is, you'll remember this when I was the budget manager, is we get billed for our MDTs in our cars. And then that money comes back to IT and then Kathy transfers a set dollar amount, about $71,000 a year over to the IT reserve. So every 5 years, we're able to get our updated MDTs. You know, if it needs to be 5 years or 6 years, we have the money set aside. The commissioners approved that a few years ago. So part of that IT cost is that they're billing us $71,000 every year. It goes back to IT and then Kathy transfers it into IT reserve and then we keep track of it. So we know how much we have at the end of the 5 years to replace those. Another general fund contribution is the benefit administration, which is our left one, guys. We do $300,000 transferred in, that's general fund. The entire fund is general fund in there because we're obligated to pay that.
Just my hearing aids. I'm trying to crank them up.
Sorry. Once all my left one guys are no longer here, if there's any balance left in that fund, the money will roll back to general fund. But just one of my guys in a nursing home is almost $100,000 a year. If I ended up with multiple ones in there, it would be depleted very quickly.
We just have one right now,
I have one in a nursing home right now.
out of the 12 that are.
Out of 12.
That are
Mhm.
headed that way.
Yes, I lost one 2 weeks ago.
Mm.
So,
You lost one 6
of-
months ago too, didn't you?
yeah, in January.
Mm.
Yeah, so I'm down to 12 that I'm taking care of. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, on that account, we're contributing how much every 350?
300,000 gets transferred in. We have quite a bit in there. We have 1.6 million in there.
Yeah, but at 1 million a year, that, I mean, or 100,000 a year, that's, doesn't take very long.
Yeah, especially if we had multiple ones that ended up in a nursing home. I did have two in a nursing home and then I lost another one. So
So Katrina, when you first joined the budget office, how much money were we kicking in each year?
300,000 for this fund.
It's been 300,000 for a
Mhm.
long time.
Yeah, I've been here 10 years now. That's been the dollar amount that's been transferred in every year. That I, best of my
I
knowledge.
remember the previous budget director was always telling us we're not putting enough in. And I thought we had built up to 300,000, but that's been the standard all along.
It's been 300,000 since I got here in 2014. I don't know what it was prior to that. But hopefully that's enough. You just don't know.
Yeah, I thought we had increased it actually within the past 3 years or something like
I
that.
think that we asked to increase it 350 at one time, but then the
And
commissioners
we-
decided to stay at 300. It's
Oh,
been
okay.
sufficient.
Well,
On just for my own verification, of what I think I know, the biggest increase is the behavioral health, because we brought those two in. That was a decision we made to not contract that anymore, but actually put them on board. Weren't we setting this paying before that, like 400 a year? Am I?
400,000?
Yeah, we dropped it from 4 people to 2,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that
so
happened at the first.
Even though
of
this looks like a
year.
big number, it is less than what we were
Mhm,
expending out. Okay,
correct.
that's what I thought I remembered.
As long as we're on that question, are you happier with this arrangement rather than the contract?
Yeah, it's a lot more, I guess, less overhead and dealing with Columbia Wellness, have more direct, I guess, control over them and less, I guess, strings attached with Columbia Wellness and all. So it, yeah, it seems to be, I think, a better model for us
good.
doing that.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about the costs for the range, how that's working out? $73,000 goes for what?
I think the bulk of that goes into maintenance, the
Mhm.
maintenance fund, and we're still developing it. Done a lot vetted, fenced, added some storage buildings out there, had wiring put in. And then had to do some substantial work on, there's a berm you shoot into,
Yeah.
it's called an eyebrow. So actually some of my staff did that. Essentially, it's a nice, really nice deck that runs the length of the shooting range to deflect any ricochets that may go up there. They've had some, I know, gravel delivered recently. I think Public Works does that for us. They bill us for that and just to maintain the shooting range. So I don't know if there's any other, there's some expenses, play the game in anglers, there's some expenses associated with the range as a whole. We pay a few things to them. There's a
Garbage,
tax.
we have to pay the garbage and things like that. We have 11 people on contract now for the use of the range. We just-
Other groups coming in and using it.
Uh,
That's a lot of
And then I
Yeah.
bill them out, whatever their use is per the contract, and then 20% of whatever I take in, I deposit in the other range fund that Sean Rowe is in charge of for lead abatement. So I always pass through that 20% to him. But I have to say, it's busier than I ever expected it to be. So that's good.
Did the Longview Range ever get built?
No, they're signed up with us and have a storage container out there on our range. They're committed.
Yeah.
And we also have, well, all the municipalities and the State Patrol, Fish and Wildlife. And we have it's a private security company that's contracted with the BPA down in Vancouver. They provide security on their federal facility there. So they're also a contractual party to this. And actually the Cowlitz Indian tribe, their police department signed one here recently as well. So it's quite busy.
Well, with all of that, I would think it wouldn't be a minus 74,000, it'd be a plus
Are we making
74.
money?
Yeah.
Is that 73 coming in?
So 73,000, when you look at your actual budget, there's ending fund balance. So the ending fund balance, we expect to have 41,000 at the end of next year. We pay all of our bills and still have 41,000 of that 73,000. 41 we expect to just be in there for emergencies. So the actual cost is 25, let's see, 30, maybe 33,000
Okay, that,
You guys
Yeah.
don't have these in front of you, that these special revenue funds have an ending fund balance in there too. So we don't expect to spend the full 73,000, only about 35. And truthfully, we might not spend all that. I don't know.
you're completely out of Crystal Pool?
No, we maintain that or that ongoing relationship. We do a few things out there, particularly the SWAT team can do some things out there that they can't do at our law enforcement range. And I think we pay $1 a year for
You pay
that.
$1 a year? Yeah.
For Crystal, that's a good deal, as opposed to the obligation the county would have if we were to leave to restore it to its
And
original
it's,
condition.
it's owned by Weyerhaeuser.
It's now owned by Weyerhaeuser, yes.
Going back to the page 2 where the IT allocations identified as 23K, there's right next to it is the insurance increase. That's also an allocation from the risk pool.
Correct.
And how much? So that's the increase. How much is the actual?
For the insurance,
Yeah.
which one are you looking at, Commissioner?
Um,
Are
Page
you-
2.
Are you looking at law records?
Yeah, oh, yeah. It's on page 2, the law records is under that.
Okay. So the law records is being billed $47,925 a year for insurance from the cost allocation. Was in there previously at 43, but it increased this year to 47. And their IT cost was 67 last year, and it's 91,000 this year. So that's where the $23,000 increase came.
That must be, well, certainly I'm slow here on this one. So I asked, you noted an increase of 48, and that is an increase to come to a total, and I was asking for the total.
47,925 is the total that they're billing for, 47,925.
47,825.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sure Kathy can talk to that more. It's quite an extensive cost allocation Excel spreadsheet to come up with that
Yeah,
formula.
it's always really interesting. Cost allocations are always, there's a pretense it's going to make things equitable, but I don't know how you define equitable when it comes all out of the same pocket anyhow.
So their health insurance is not what the deputies get. The deputies are even more expensive.
This is the risk pool insurance.
Yeah, this is risk
Oh, that's just the
pool
risk. Oh, that's
insurance.
not medical costs. Oh,
No.
okay.
No,
Well, the medical
All right.
costs would be a lot higher.
Yeah. medical
So probably for Kathy a little bit, how does the sheriff's department, how do you allocate to them?
Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. On the cost allocation for risk and insurance, it's based upon man hours. And so it's allocated across all departments based upon the man hours as a percentage of the total.
Oh, okay, I remember.
So
this.
larger departments are going to see a larger allocation of the risk pool dollars.
I remember a discussion with Mark Nelson once, and he got so frustrated with me. He said, well, nobody's shooting at you. So I cost the same as one of the deputies costs for insurance.
On the risk pool, yes.
But nobody's shooting at me.
Yeah.
Well, maybe,
On the,
don't touch that one, Brad.
yeah, the industrial accident account, which is your workers' comp, is based upon man hours, but then it's incremented. It has a ratio based upon risk categories. So Sheriff's Department is charged at a higher rate per man hour on that allocation. But for risk
Okay.
pool, we just did it based upon total hours.
Got it. Thank you. And the janitorial costs are based on hours? Must,
Square footage.
I think she said square footage. That was why some years have come up, because Department of Energy Management has a big space for
Yeah.
basically 3 people or something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. And even law records, it's not that big, but they have some storage rooms that they keep their files in. So theirs is $27,000 a year for janitorial. And then looks like it's going to be about 29,000 for Department of Emergency Management next year. It's a lot of money. I think facilities does that cost allocation now.
Correct. Facilities does that allocation.
And that's only broke out because they're special revenue funds. So Kathy, and I'm guessing non-departmental, pays for everybody else's janitorial. So we don't see it in our budget for the sheriff's office. She pays it out of non-departmental for the janitorial or out of facilities.
It's out of facilities, which is a
facilities.
general fund.
Right. So we don't have a line item that says janitorial for the sheriff's office.
who takes care of the impressed account? Like for the replacement of your automobiles, is that elsewhere?
Done through Public Works, Motor Pool.
It's in there, okay. So if we wanted to get a full picture of law enforcement cost to us, it would be a different picture than we see here.
I can
Because,
tell you how much they're billing us for next year.
I beg your pardon?
I can tell you how much they're gonna bill us for next year for Public Works. Find it here for you. $1.1 million we're gonna pay into for maintenance and replacement costs for our vehicles into Public Works next year. It's in our budget, 1.1 million. And I should
Well,
say,
we're paying for it. We just assign it to your department.
true. And then 48,000 comes from Law and Justice Fund. They pay into Motor Pool for the 3.45 FTEs they have in there. So there's also 48,000 more that comes from Law and Justice that goes over because we have cars for those deputies too.
So that 1.1 is determined in sort of an actuarial sense.
Yeah, Sean Rowe calculates it and sends our costs to us.
He enjoys doing that stuff.
I think he kind of indicated in one of our meetings that that was probably going to change because of the cost of vehicles and different
Well, and it went
things.
up 122,000.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that is taken into consideration. Cars are costing more and maintenance is costing more.
It still surprises me how long it takes you to get a vehicle.
Of course, they are bigger than the old Crown Vics. That's what we used to buy, right? All the time. And now we have much bigger vehicles.
We're actually, yeah, Tahoes, and actually due to cost, we're starting to get some Ford F-150 trucks that are pursuit rated. They're about $10,000 less than a Tahoe
New
to
Tahoe.
purchase, and they do operate fine. So we're actually getting several of those, and we are still waiting on one. I think it was ordered about a year ago, still waiting for one to come in, I believe. So yeah, it's about, it can be up to a year to even see them, then got to get them outfitted
Yeah.
after that.
It's good. Do they all, is it all the same? Because I don't know, if they get, let's say GM gets an order for 10,000 police rated vehicles, is it a different assembly line? Is it something they cut off and say, okay, we build these to a different spec? Or is it just what would go out to consumer and then you outfit them when you get them?
No, they produce a specific police package on those that are pretty much
Okay.
consistent. I think there's a few options and some of the wiring you can order, some
So that-
wiring and harnesses. So
That may be why some of the delay, because it's a different
Well,
product run.
I actually think this is the chairman's way of asking if he can ride and drive some of them.
Well, no.
No, I suspect that there isn't a separate assembly line. It's once
Yeah.
they come off the assembly line, then they go to a special shop.
Yeah,
And
I,
the Crown Vics are, their suspension was horrible. I assume you didn't like pursuing people with a Crown, in a Crown. You did not want to be in a Crown Vic in pursuit.
you didn't want to go down the highway like this?
yeah, it depended. We're an all-wheel drive fleet now, so, which
Yeah.
is very, very helpful for the
Okay.
inclement weather.
And you're no longer interested at the moment on hybrids.
Yeah, we had 4 of them, and there's a few problems with those, but the last ones we ordered, actually the order got canceled on us. They couldn't even supply those about a year ago, so we were kind of left scrambling. They offered gas-powered ones, but there's some other associated costs with the Ford Interceptors due to their body, construction unibody. Whenever there's some damage done, it was more expensive to really fix those than were the Tahoes, which were
Oh, yeah.
body
Yeah.
components were easier to fix. So the motor pool really wanted to transition away from those.
And you agreed.
Oh, excuse me? And
And it's an agreement with you, or you're in agreement with that.
yeah, yes, it seemed the Tahoes seemed to be work better for us. And then actually the pickup trucks we're getting seem to be well received as well.
And that 1.1 million or so, is there a breakdown between what goes in for new vehicles and what goes in for maintenance?
Actually, I talked to
Okay.
Sean Rowe about that here just a little bit ago. I believe it's, is it 2,000 a month and it's broken down? I had it here somewhere.
The replacement of that is, the replacement side is 855,000 and the operations side is 250 to equal that 1.1 million.
And what he told me, it's about $24,000 a year goes in for each vehicle. 19,000 of that goes to reserves for replacement and 5,000 is set aside for maintenance.
Also, a couple years ago, the commissioners approved setting aside $22,000 a year to replace the sheriff's portable radios. So part of this money that Sean has in here, he should have a fund that is funded for our portable radio replacement for 10 years. We should have about 135,000 set aside. We're quite a few years into it now, but it doesn't reflect on here, but he has a fund over there for that. And you also approved Dana at the coroner's office to set aside some money for her, so we would get radios at the same time on the same frequencies.
Next year sometime, you got to go out for a day wireless. We okayed the contract for this year, but it expires again next year.
Is that the maintenance, the day wireless maintenance agreement?
But
That's
it's-
countywide?
It's through your office though, right?
So you'll go out for an RFP on that?
But it's
The-
through
the-
Kathy's, I think it's through Kathy's office for countywide.
The reason I'm sort of interested in this is I know it really bothers me that we don't have a uniform ability to communicate across agencies. And of course, we can't control the world and all that, but I remember hearing arguments between Fire Department A and Fire Department B. We want to do this, they want to do that, screw them. And it's, but so now in the sheriff's vehicle, what do you have to do to communicate with the state patrol? Can you go straight?
We cannot talk on their frequency. They don't allow that. Their troopers, they have permission to come on our frequency. We can talk to them. There is a joint statewide frequency called Learn. We can go on that and call them and meet there on that frequency, or they can speak on ours, but the state patrol frequency itself is kind of sacred. Yes.
Yeah, and of course,
But we do have ways to communicate some other frequencies.
in a hot situation, though, you folks have good communication.
Yes, and try to, especially when things get out on the freeway or a mobile situation, go to this, it's Learn, it's a statewide common frequency the dispatch can monitor as well.
Good, okay, thank you.
So if we're looking at your budget figure and we want to find out how much is going towards animal control, because we have a contract, we can compare previous years and expenses. How do we find that?
So there's a separate bars number in our budget. So it's kind of a budget within a budget.
Okay,
And the animal control budget is 429,346. That includes that part-time person that you approved a couple weeks ago with Under Sheriff Handy. That gives us about 90,000 in a line to pay Humane Society for animals. We're at about 51,000 this year we've already spent to pay into the Humane Society. But two of those cases were pretty significant. One of them was like $25,000 with 11 different dogs, one case. Took
Wow.
up $25,000. And then a second case was some horses that took about $4,000 of that 51. So you never know what we're going to get. They sit right outside my door and I cannot believe how busy they are. They're on the phone, they're leaving. Just, I cannot believe that there's as many calls as they go on.
And I was going to mention on animal control, looks like we're projecting out, we're probably going to be at about 335,000 for the year. And like Katrina said, with the exception of those two cases, we've done real well on the housing animals. We've done the temporary shelter there that, and I have some numbers on that. We're running, I think, over 50% of the animals we come in contact with get returned home, and we don't have to pay the Humane Society the $300 for that. And we've actually the last few days, myself and Chief Spencer, we've been over there working, building a permanent outside covering over the kennels. Last year, we had a tarp that didn't work too well, so we're getting ready for the rainy season and adding that. And that's why we have 8 kennels over there, and that's worked very well for us, more than paid for itself already.
I think that was a great idea and it's obviously worked. And the 50% mark, that, if you were to ask me when you started that, I would have never give you that high. So I think that's a great number.
Yep, and been in touch with Humane Society. We only have a contract for the sheltering through the end of the year. My understanding is we'll be hearing from them here in the next couple of weeks as to what that's going to look like, what those numbers will look like. This year we've done, I think it was going in blind. We had to invest some money up front, but it's actually worked out quite well for us, I think, budgetarily. So we're good there.
and how many employees again? I can't remember.
We have 2 FTEs.
2 and then a part-time?
We've got approval for that and we haven't started the hiring process, but new employees they've been showing up every day. I don't know if they've even taken a sick day, but of course they're going to be building some banks and going to be taking some vacation and sick leave and some training. So we wanted to have that extra resource to call in on a part-time basis. So we're working towards that.
And what about the behavioral health program? Do we have a separate line item for them as well?
Yes, they have their own bars number, which makes it a budget within a budget.
Right.
And they're in the budget for 255,796 for 2025.
That includes car costs, right? They have their own
Correct.
car.
Mhm.
One car or just?
One.
Just one, and they set aside 15,000 of the number I told you before. 15,000 of that number for the 1.1 million goes towards the behavior health. And then for the animal control, we put 25,000 towards their 2 cars that they have there. So part of our sheriff's budget, so the significant part of our revenue comes from the state for criminal justice, high crimes. We get like $1.3 million revenue. Don't have to do anything. It just comes to the county and gets deposited in the sheriff's budget. Then we have the registered sex offender clerk grant, about 98,000. We have a contract with Pacific Corps. And so 100% of that deputy, even though he's in our expense, We get about $190,000 back from that. And then we have that warehouser contract where I'll bill out and get 35,000 for that this year. The rest of our revenue is pretty much gun permits, get people getting their CPLs, civil papers being served. We have a contract with Kelso for animal control. If they're not available, our people go over and I bill it, but it's pretty small, $2,000 a year. We get a little bit of money back from State Patrol whenever we're required to fingerprint somebody, they pay us for that cost. We get about $4,000 a year. That's about it for, we got some money from auctions. When we're done with evidence, we can sell it at auction and put the money back in the budget.
I could mention two other issues. One is the 911 center. We pay a user fee. Last year, they actually reduced it by 10%. And this year, it's up to board approval. I think we're going to discuss it next week at our meeting. The intent is to keep that same level that we had last year going into next year. So that's a reduction from 2023 by 10%. So that's a good thing. And also, you're probably aware that went out to proposal for security services at the Hall of Justice, jail, juvenile in this building. We had 9 proposals, and actually we're going to be meeting after this meeting, go over those 9 proposals that have been submitted and try to identify at least a couple, 2 or 3 companies to look closer at. But looking at the general bids, it's really, I don't think it's going to be a substantial increase from what we're currently paying now to maintain that service.
Did you say it is a substantial increase?
It is not.
It
no,
is
it's
not.
still-
Thank you, Don.
I think it's still pretty close within current budgeted numbers.
I think I have 430,000 in the budget for court security
Mhm.
until we decide on the next contract if it needs to be increased or decreased.
So Katrina, you mentioned quite a few other sources other than the general fund.
Mhm.
I know it's always awkward to do math in public. What percent does it come up to? We've got about a $20 million budget altogether.
Mhm. You mean from all the other revenue
Yeah,
sources?
so what percent are we at? Are we even at
I-
10? Are we even at 10%?
I don't know. I'd have to go do some math there.
Okay.
I keep trying to apply for grants for us too. I don't, we did get a $48,000 Star Chase grant this last year. It's a device that goes on the car and they can project it onto speeding cars. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But we did get that one and we got that same grant the year before that. So they're getting some of the tools they need through some grants. We're up for a $12,000 grant with Weyerhaeuser this week. They're deciding to help pay for our responder life. And I got a grant a couple years ago to finish the weight room downstairs with all the equipment that anybody from the county can use. And if we get this grant, that'll finish that room off. So I'm also filling out a grant for radars right now. That's $10,000 to help replace some of our broken radar guns that we have.
So you mentioned the weight room
Mhm.
for training. That's probably for our new commissioners to be aware of, that they can take advantage of that
It's really nice.
without having to pay any fees.
No fees. And I have to give kudos to the facility guys. They went in and painted it. We got through a grant. We got the padded floors down. We've got all new equipment in there. It's really nice. So people should use it. Any other questions? Sorry, I don't have much voice today. Starring grandkids.
Till you just run out. No, I don't have anything else. It looks pretty straightforward though.
Kind of just a general question I like to ask is, what does your crystal ball say about 2025? Is you've got everything you need to operate in 2025 included in the budget?
So
No
I'm,
surprises?
so I'm going to say that Troy Brightbill has some concerns that we've been talking about. Remember, I just brought up the MDTs, that we set aside some money for some MDTs. it's really a convoluted system, the way that we set that up in the system. Same with the portable radios, having some of the money go over there. I would think it would be frugal for this county at some point to set money away for the radios that are in our cars as the upgrade. Am I stating that right? Portables and the cars. We don't have any replacement for that, and those are big ticket items. At some point, I think the county should look at making sure maybe they have a designated fund that those monies go into so that we have it in the future. Otherwise, it might be a $400,000 ticket that we don't have any money for in the future. I think that Troy could talk to you more about that. That would be the only thing that I can think of. Just planning for the future, not big ticket stuff.
I'll just say our current radio system is VHF, and the 911 board, we're spending about 2 million to upgrade the current system. That was kind of a short-term fix. There was a study done and a recommendation to go to a UHF system, which would cost upwards of 20 million. We decided to go with the less expensive upgrade what we currently have. But looking to the future, a lot of agencies have gone to the UHF, and the next generation of radios that we'd like to purchase are like multi-band ones that would work on both. So would be wouldn't have to transition. If the 911 center went to a different system, we'd already have the equipment in place. We could just flip the switch and go live on with that. But there's a lot of behind the scenes discussion at 911 about, well, if we want to go that direction, the funding for that, and whether or not 911 want to take on purchase of portable and vehicle radios as part of that, to have one integrated system and everybody be on the same equipment platform. That comes with a pretty hefty price tag. In fact, I think the 20 million price tag, 6 million of that was just for radios for the user agencies, and the rest was for the system itself. But for the short term, we got a $2 million grant that we're spending and upgrading the VHS system, which we hope to have done by April. And indications are that'll go a long ways to improve our radio system, and we'll get some additional life out of it.
But you're not hot to trot to go to UHF, are you?
Not given the cost. No, there's some.
Well, I mean, even without the cost, the penetration in trees is considerably less.
Well, the studies that we shown, actually, they recommended that for the I-5 corridor agencies along there, it'd work fine. For us out in the county, they were actually recommending a hybrid system, VHF and UHF, depending where you're at. You'd flip a switch to, because we have a lot of, as you know, terrain challenges in our county and the impacts radio stuff. That's actually what they were recommending to go to like a dual band system.
For me, the most horrible thing is you're the deputy and you can't talk to anybody because there are too many trees.
Yep.
So you go to VHF and that should handle it.
Yeah, and it doesn't impact most of the agencies, but they're respectful of our concerns and also some of the rural fire districts that deal with the issues outside the I-5 corridor.
Several years ago, you made a request of us for funding night vision goggles. That was about 3 years ago.
We got a grant through Department of Emergency Management for night vision goggles, $58,000 that went on our new SWAT Bearcat. So we didn't have to ask for general fund dollars for that. Maybe, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was Homeland Security funds
Homeland
through
Security.
FEMA. Those came from.
So as a piece of equipment, it has a certain shelf life, I suppose. How long do we have until we need to come up with the dollars to replace them? Do you know?
Jordan deals with that with SWAT. 10 years. So we have another 7, 8 years.
So the interesting thing in terms of saving up for capital purchases like you suggested, it's a matter of where you want to park the money to make the best gain and keep it from being, and the challenge is make sure it's not spent, because turns out that commissioners transition away and the people who approve the plan aren't there anymore. And so I think.
Have we had that problem before?
Well, it's actually, the problem's going to double this year than what we've had before.
Yeah, but I mean, when you have an impressed account that just says I'm saving this up for, I can't recall a time when we broke that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's a matter of making sure you have the procedures in place, the processes in place. So,
I think it would be the best to have its own enterprise fund and have all the money in there that can't go away. At the end of the year, it just stays in that fund and then you could have it there. But there are lots of things, probably the jail also. There's a lot of things that they need a replacement for, our drones, our night vision goggles, our tasers, all of those things are technology based that are going to have a replacement at some point. Be really good planning. You would do that at your own house, or you would hope to do that at your own house.
Not to mention body cameras and car cameras.
Mhm.
So
And we bought those through that one-time $400,000 that the state gave us. So there's no plan to have those replaced either. Just something to think about.
I know there's a limit to how much the government needs to be saving. Because if savings is a virtue, taxpayers are probably the best to be the ones doing the savings. That means you don't charge them as much in taxes. I mean, that's kind of the balance you have to go, has to be the right mix of what's prudent and responsible financial wise and how high the taxes can be before the taxpayers revolt. And they have different ways of revolting. So.
I think my fear is that I won't be here in 10 years. And I don't know that somebody else is going to remember that, oh, by the way, 22,000 of this goes into Public Works for portable radios to be replaced. Even though I have the minutes and all these things, maybe those people have all left, maybe the budget office has left, then it's going to be record keeping and can you point to it? So I think it needs to be cleaned up.
But of course, the reality is that whoever makes those decisions in year one doesn't necessarily have a monopoly on wisdom, which means if you can't make the argument down the road to a new board of commissioners, is the program that valuable? You know, I mean, so there's nothing wrong with having to make the argument again and argue it. Just
Absolutely.
because, there's a reason there's change and have to be able to defend the decisions that are made all the time. That's not a bad thing. It's just, it's not quite as efficient, but.
Earlier, we discussed something that ended up being a statement that said whenever possible, we should operate as if we are a business, just like the private people business have to operate. And the danger of not having an impressed account is that you really don't know how much it's costing you. And I've said before, probably not to offend anybody, but we are like slumlords. We buy something and we don't put anything aside for maintaining it. If you're a private private landlord, you put a lot of effort out to make sure that you stay in business year 5, 10, 15. That's what this imprest would do. It just means that at year, say maybe 9, 10 years from now, you don't have to hit the public with a huge bill.
Well, we can also invest in, if we had our own special revenue fund, we can invest the money in the treasurer. So we're earning some interest
Oh
on
yeah,
that money too.
it's not being squandered in
Right.
that sense.
Yeah.
But the way it's set up, the investing is done by the treasurer.
Correct, but I
Yeah.
can send a voucher to them. They'll invest however much I need and the money will stay in that same fund where right now, I don't know how much it's being invested in the other two buckets that we have money going to.
My colleague used the term impressed. Are there double meetings for that? Are there more than one meetings? Because I know we adjusted an impressed fund that it's cash on hand for your daily
Like a petty
operations.
cash, like a petty cash fund with
So,
an
yeah,
imprest.
so I mean, that's typically the government version of an impressed fund. But I think based on what you were talking about, to you, that impressed fund is a savings account. It's an investment account where it's designated. So it's two different things. So, okay.
Is there a proper name?
I don't know, probably a reserve fund, yeah. instead of an impressed. I think of an impressed like you, like I have an impressed fund for petty cash that I
Yeah.
can reimburse petty cash.
Well,
I knew what you meant.
according to Bill Gates, what we're dealing with is just a petty account.
Yeah.
If you have any more questions, just let me know. Commissioner Weber, I'll look at that number that you asked for and get back to you.
And thank you very much. I appreciate it laid out this way. That's a lot easier to
Kind of
understand.
gives you a true picture of all the different funds and how it all goes to the sheriff's office.
Actually, my only question is really for Kathy. Where are we going to come up with 560,000 more dollars for the sheriff?
Well, 200,
That's something to be worked, that's for us to work out.
260 of it will be coming from mental health tax. So that cuts that number down.
I don't want to repeat myself, but that tax is gone.
It is a public meeting, and I didn't see any hand raised or any public comment on it. Okay? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, commissioners.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna. go back and ask
Pretty
you
charts.
about,
Oh, too many pies. Too many pieces of pie, though. Oh, my goodness.
I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, but I do have handouts in case anybody wants one. Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. I've handed out to you the first item. I'm going to just kind of talk about general fund, big picture. These are it's a pie chart, and it's about what are the how is the general fund split up between our various departments. These are some of the departments that have, I think I picked a ratio of more than $500,000. And all the other smaller ones are in the orange category called general fund. But today, Sheriff was here. They're 16% of all of our general fund expenses. They're one of our largest departments. Jail is our second largest, corrections is our second largest department, and they'll be here on Monday to present their budget. And then the third largest is our non-departmental, and I'll talk more about that later, probably on Monday. And then as you can see, some of the other categories and the other departments, Office of Public Defense, prosecuting attorney, and such. And then there's an actual handout behind it that is those same departments and showing you the difference between the 24 revised budget and the 2025 proposed budget and what changes. And if there's any particular departments you're interested in, I'll either get the information or I'll ask them to come and present at a workshop. Couple of them, the revised budget, for example, Parks and Recreation has an allocation in there that was it's their amended 2024 budget, and it includes an allocation that was approved for a park. I think it was like 100,000. So it makes it look like their budget's going down next year, but that's because the 24 revised budget has that extra expenditure in there. So there's a few things like that. Most of the increases in our general fund departments is due to COLAs and medical insurance increase. I think most of it's in the personnel area. And then,
reserve funds.
excuse me?
And reserve funds.
and reserve funds.
Yeah, we've increased them.
Yes, and increased in our cost allocations. You're right. And then I thought I would show you the general fund. We pulled all the general fund in, and we put it in the same format that we've been doing our presentations for departments, and where we show the revenues and we show the expenses. And this particular one, first page is revenue comparison. And so for the general fund, our total for 2025 proposed budget is a little over $59 million. Our budget, revised budget for 2024 was almost, it's 58.8 million. And then I have the line items, the different components of that: taxes, license, intergovernmental, goods and services, fines and penalties, miscellaneous, and transfers. And so this shows you whether they're increasing over 24 or decreasing over 24. And I can explain that in the line for our intergovernmental, for example, that is primarily made up of our mostly state grants, criminal justice, which the sheriff mentioned, that they get a $1.3 million grant. And some of our, the largest item in there is our PUD privilege tax, and it's considered intergovernmental. And then for goods and services, it's primarily recording fees, charges for the jail. The jail makes up the majority of the revenue stream for that line, where we build the different cities for their daily jail rate, and other district courts have municipal contracts as well. And then we also have motor vehicle license fees in that line. So those are some of the larger items in our goods and services. And miscellaneous is our landfill rent that comes to the general fund, which is the 7.5 million. And then investment earnings are a little over almost 2.2 million in our proposed budget.
Where does the money from DNR come in?
Can you say that again?
Where does the money from DNR for managing our forest lands come in? I know we get a timber tax, of course, on harvest, and that would be on the timber tax thing.
That comes in the
But-
tax line.
But we do get our share of the profits from harvest. Do you know where that is?
Let me see if
Is
that's.
that would that be intergovernmental, since they're sending us the money?
Yes, I have some federal, no, that's child support. I'll have to look and see where that's at, because I don't see it on.
Because it should be different than from the timber tax, which is a tax, but
It's on the timber taxes on the timber line, so it may be on the taxes line.
just curious.
But in total, our revenues are for general fund are going up about $800,000 over 2024.
But expenses are going up
Yeah,
almost 2 million.
then the next page is the expenses for general fund. And this is where personnel line has both benefits and salaries and overtime and things like that. So Personnel is going from 44.9 million to 46.1 million for a 2.7% increase. That's primarily our COLAs. And then our supplies are actually going down just slightly. Our services are going up $1.4 million. And most of that on services relates to the internal billings that we've talked about last week, the IT billings, our insurance billings, the increases we're seeing in those. Let me see if there was something, I had a little bit of information on that. Well, I don't know. Oh, here it is. I have too many papers here. And letters, the numbers are way too small too. It's primarily our, motor pools going up a little bit, our IT, our jail medical expenses are going up in the services area. Those are the primary ones. Insurance, IT, industrial accident. And then a little bit in our, we put more funds in our LT1 and we put them under professional services. We collapsed salary lines in our LT1 budget and we put $100,000 in services for that. So that's why it made services go up, but personnel went down on that particular fund. And in total, that fund went down about $80,000 cut to that fund. So, and then on our debt service is pretty flat. Our capital expenses went down a little bit, about 500,000. And then transfers are virtually flat. They're about the same as they were in the previous budget. So for a total of $76.4 million of expenses for 2025 versus $7.74 million for an increase of almost $1.9 million.
Kathy, on the capital, that's not all of our capital.
No, this is just general fund.
This is a reserve. This is that reserve that we draw on for small projects.
Yeah, that's actually in its own fund. It's called Capital Improvements Fund. This is just the general fund. And so what you're seeing is, I think there were some capital items that were budgeted for 24. And once they were purchased, they're not rebudgeted again for 25. That's why it went, that's why that went down.
It seems like we always have some improvements planned that we don't get to and they
Yes.
flop over to the next budget. Does
Right.
that include any of those that we?
That's not in this general fund. We transfer $1 million to the Capital Improvements Fund. And that's the fund that we call our CIP and other deferred maintenance type projects. And that fund has about $3 million on an annual basis.
I
spend.
thought that amount we looked at.
Yeah,
We
it's
have that
close to
spreadsheet
3.
that we look at all the time for.
Right,
projects.
and that's going to be coming up, I think on the 21st, maybe, is when we have that presentation, or the 22nd.
So Kathy, I'd like to go back to the pie chart just for a moment.
Okay,
Down towards the bottom of the pie chart, you have a piece of the pie labeled general fund. All the other titles are for programs. What does that refer to?
that one is where I had smaller budget expenditures. And so they were too small, so I collapsed all of them into one one sliver there,
So it's sort of like miscellaneous.
sort of like miscellaneous.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
We select, it's already pretty darn busy, this pie chart, but we selected departments that were less than 500,000 and we just, with the budget, put them in this little sliver there, general fund.
And how's that different from non-departmental?
Non-departmental is primarily those services that are not really a particular department. Like, for example, debt service is in non-departmental. Non-departmental, there's some of the dues and subscriptions that are for county-wide purposes.
We used to pay our animal control contract out of there. Has that been removed or is?
Yeah,
the
animal
sheriff getting
control,
money from
yeah,
non-
animal control was removed from that budget from non-departmental and placed in the sheriff's budget. Yeah, so I will do a presentation on everything that's in non-departmental since it's the third largest one on this pie chart. I'll do a specific presentation for you on that.
I'm still not sure where we're getting all that extra money.
The which money?
I'm still not sure where we're getting all the extra money for the additional expenditures that
Yeah.
have been asked.
I've looked at our, preliminarily looked at our ending fund balance for general fund. And as Katrina pointed out, the general fund balance, the budget stabilization fund, which is our rainy day fund. It's also part of our reserve. And then that benefits administration and just in general. And we're probably looking at right now, we're very close to cutting it very, very tight, about $7 million if all expenses come in at what we have budgeted. And they typically don't. We typically spend less than what we have budgeted, but we're going to be very tight on maintaining that 1 month's reserve. So I'll have more information on that. I'll put some presentation materials together for that when I talk about the non-departmental as well. And you had also asked me to look at a couple of things last week. One was the way we're allocating industrial accident fund, where it's based upon labor hours, and then it was a ratio of risk L&I rating. And I did look at that. We do have the ability to go back and redo that calculation. And for departments that are made up of different risk class, like the sheriff's department, their law enforcement records office is primarily administrative, which is one of the lower risk categories. They are currently, changing the charge and prorating it between a department, between those risk categories, and I can do that. It's not going to change the bottom line. It'll change maybe what was allocated to sheriff or roads, but then a general fund may pick up some additional expenses when we slice and dice it back up. So, but I can redo it.
But the law enforcement records being classified as a low race, that those dollars also come from
Yes.
outside.
Yep. Yeah. So I have the ability, we found a report that we could run to get those numbers. And so I will redo the cost allocation and show you what the difference is.
Well, I guess we have to be careful. We don't change the formula and cost the general fund more dollars. We don't want to do that. That's not the purpose.
Well, I'm
Supposed
first
to be
going to first show it to you and show you the difference side by side, line it up. Preliminary run, second run. The other thing you asked me to look at was, are there any other general central services type departments that we should be billing out that we currently are not doing that with? We looked at, I had a discussion with the auditor's office about perhaps maybe some of the functions in the commissioner's office being allocated as central services. And once we sat down and we discussed it and looked at things, there really was maybe one position in the commissioner's office that could be allocated out. And so for the time and effort to do that allocation, I'm not recommending it, and neither is our comptroller. We discussed it and we're not really recommending doing that. All other functions of the commissioner's office are legislatively mandated, and therefore they can't be allocated. They're not considered central services. I think those were some of the things you had asked me to look at and get back to you on.
Appreciate it.
So Monday we have, like I said, we have jail. We also have building and planning. I don't think their budget is changing over what it currently is, other than maybe salary. But there's on the slate to discuss their budget with you. And then if there's any other ones that you'd like me to ask to be included in some of the future workshops, I can make those arrangements. But we have those two departments Monday. If possible, I'll slide myself in on Monday possibly to talk about non-departmental. And then after that, roads and parks and facilities, landfill, all of that will be later in October. Mike Moss will be bringing all those, I think it's on the 22nd. And then we have a workshop slated to talk about any personnel request. Right now, we don't have anything significant there. We have a few. And then we also have slated another meeting to talk about the roads 6-year budget, updating that 6-year budget. So any questions for me?
It's all good. I did take a look at the pie chart and added up the percents of the law and justice programs, and it 64%.
Yeah, I
We
was gonna
talked about
say,
73 before, but it's 64% for us.
it's our most significant functional expense in our general fund.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if 64% of the increased ask is from law and justice.
I've spent a lot of time looking at contrasting all the budgets and asking departments questions and just making sure that we, anything that was greater than what we had previously approved when we approved the full biennial budget. So I'm been asking them to provide details and things like that.
So the information that Katrina gave to us jives with the figures that you've been working with.
Yes. Yep. Are there anything else that you would like at a future date for me to bring?
Look like it, at least not at this time.
Yeah.
Future discussions might trigger something, you know.
Yeah, we also have workshop devoted for discussing the behavioral health tax and where we're at, and the expenditures for the coming year for 2025 and the fund balance. And I'm happy to report that it's looking like the fund balance, like we said, was over a little over close to $6 million that we started 24 with. And we're right on track with what we had projected in the biennial budget. So we have sufficient behavioral health tax dollars sitting there to cover 24, 25, and some left over. So. But we
Okay,
have a workshop devoted just to that.
yeah. Any public comment on what you've seen today? Okay, I don't see any.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
okay. Thank you.
Anything else, gentlemen, before we go? Think we're good? Okay. We will adjourn. Thank you.